They saw a beautiful woman in a tight PT shirt and dismissed her. They ordered her to change or leave. But when she turned, they saw the ink on her back, a secret that could end careers. The air at Blackstone Mountain Training Center was thin and sharp, tasting of pine and diesel. At 9,000 feet, the Colorado sun was a merciless white disk in a cobalt sky, and every sound, the rhythmic thud of boots on gravel, the distant crackle of a firing range, the whine of a C-130 overhead, carried with an unnerving clarity. This was a place of hard edges, where nature and military precision met to forge soldiers. Into this world of stone and discipline, Seraphina Gallo drove her dusty Jeep, its engine humming a tune of civilian intrusion. When she stepped out, the base seemed to hold its breath for a second. At 40, Sarah was a paradox. She moved with the quiet, deliberate economy of a lifelong soldier, but she was packaged in a form that Blackstone's stark functionality had no category for. She was stunning. A cascade of raven black hair was pulled back into a severe knot, but it couldn't tame the high cheekbones, the full lips, and the brilliant, emerald green eyes that seemed to hold a history of their own. It was her figure, however, that caused the real disruption. She wore a faded gray army PT shirt and simple black shorts, but on her, the uniform was transformed. Her body was a symphony of powerful, mature curves, a statuesque S-shape with a shockingly voluptuous E-cup bust that the thin cotton shirt fought a losing battle to contain. The word Army, printed in black block letters, was stretched and distorted across her chest, a silent testament to a physique that defied regulation standards. As she walked toward the administrative building, a duffel slung over one shoulder, she became a magnet for covert glances. Two civilian staffers chatting by a water cooler fell silent, their eyes following her with a mixture of awe and thinly veiled disapproval. "Guess the new yoga instructor is here," one of them muttered, just loud enough to be heard. Another, a young specialist at the front desk, did a poor job of hiding his gawking before snapping his attention back to his monitor, a faint flush creeping up his neck. Sarah saw it all, but her expression remained a placid mask of neutrality. She was here on a promise to an old friend, a sergeant major who'd asked her to help pace the female recruits for their high-altitude evaluation. "Need someone to show them what can't stop, won't stop really looks like, Sarah," he'd said over the phone. She agreed, not for the nostalgia, but for the memory of being 19 and terrified, and for the woman who had shown her the way. She carried the ghosts of her past in the quiet set of her shoulders and the deliberate way she placed her feet. To the casual observer, she was just a beautiful older woman, maybe a retiree clinging to a past identity, her bombshell figure incongruous with the faded military apparel. They saw the woman. They saw the shirt. They failed, entirely, to see the soldier. The refrigerated air of the admin building was a shock after the mountain heat. The interior was a familiar government beige, smelling of industrial floor cleaner and bureaucracy. Sarah approached the front counter, her soft-soled boots making no sound. She placed her authorization papers on the counter, her movements precise. "Seraphina Gallo," she said, her voice calm and even. "Here for training support." The specialist, whose name tag read Pierce, looked up. Not the specialist from outside, but a different man, a lieutenant. Early 30s, with the kind of stiff, untested confidence that came straight from a textbook. His uniform was perfectly pressed, his boots gleamed, and his eyes, after a quick, dismissive glance at her paperwork, flicked to her chest. He lingered there for a fraction of a second, a flicker of disapproval in his eyes. "Ma'am," he began, his tone dripping with condescending politeness. "This is a military installation, not a fitness club. Regulation AR 670-1 is quite clear on uniform standards. That is not authorized for non-active personnel on this base." Sarah didn't react. She simply met his gaze, her emerald eyes unblinking. The silence stretched, filled only by the hum of the fluorescent lights. Lieutenant Pierce seemed to take her silence as acquiescence. He gestured to a cardboard box behind the counter. "We can provide you with appropriate civilian attire, of course," he said, pulling out a gray, shapeless cotton t-shirt, easily in XXL. The implication was clear: cover yourself up. Wear this, and you're welcome to participate. Otherwise, I'm afraid base policy will require you to leave the premises. The two female staffers from earlier were now openly watching, smirking. They saw a confrontation they understood, a young, by-the-book officer putting a woman who didn't fit the mold back in her place. Sarah looked at the ridiculously large shirt, then back at the lieutenant's smug face. Her mind briefly flashed to a mud-caked compound in a country that didn't officially exist, where the only uniform that mattered was the one that didn't get you killed. The absurdity of this moment, of this boy playing soldier with his rulebook, was a bitter taste in her mouth. She offered no argument, no defense. The highest form of contempt is to not engage. With a slow, deliberate nod, she bent down to pick up her duffel bag from the floor. She turned her back on him, preparing to walk away from the base, from the promise, from the whole ridiculous charade. She would just leave. It happened in the space of a heartbeat. As Sarah bent and turned, the motion was fluid, powerful. The bottom of her tight gray PT shirt, which she'd tucked loosely into her shorts, pulled free and rode up her back for a mere second. It exposed a hand's breadth of skin between her shoulder blades, skin weathered by sun and time, but marked by something timeless. There, etched in stark, black ink, was a tattoo. It wasn't a floral design or a sentimental quote. It was a brand. The design was a stylized, geometric ghost skull, its hollow eyes seeming to stare into a void. Below it, integrated into the design, were the stark Roman numerals, 734. Lieutenant Pierce didn't see it. He was already turning away, a self-satisfied smirk on his face, the problem of the beautiful, non-regulation veteran neatly solved. The civilian staffers were whispering, their victory confirmed. But one man did see it. Master Sergeant Reyes, the grizzled NCO in charge of training logistics, was walking down the main hallway, a clipboard tucked under his arm. He was a man who had seen 3 decades of service, whose face was a roadmap of deployments the lieutenant could only read about. His eyes, by sheer chance, fell on Sarah's back at the exact moment the shirt lifted. He stopped. Dead. The clipboard slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers, clattering loudly on the polished linoleum floor. The sound echoed in the quiet office. Reyes's face, normally a mask of calm competence, went ashen. His blood ran cold. He knew that mark. He had seen it once, and only once, in a top-secret after-action briefing at JSOC headquarters, a briefing he was technically supposed to forget ever happened. Unit 734. Task Force 7. Designation, Spectre. The deniable ops phantoms sent to places the government couldn't admit existed, to do jobs no one else could. They were ghost stories, whispered legends told to scare new intelligence analysts. The unit that was officially disbanded, its records scrubbed, its members erased. But the legends were real. And one of them was being told to leave his base over a t-shirt. He watched, paralyzed, as Sarah continued toward the door, completely unaware of the bomb she had just detonated. His throat was dry. He knew what he was supposed to do, nothing. Forget what he saw. But the man who had pulled wounded soldiers out of burning Humvees couldn't just stand by. Ignoring Pierce, ignoring everything but the ghost walking out the door, Master Sergeant Reyes turned and began moving quickly, almost running, toward the communications office at the back of the building. Master Sergeant Reyes bypassed his own office, heading straight for the secure communications room, a windowless vault marked, "Authorized personnel only." He badged himself in, the heavy door clicking shut behind him with an unnerving finality. The room smelled of ozone and stale coffee. His hands, which had remained steady under rocket fire, trembled slightly as he picked up the secure phone and dialed a 10-digit number he had committed to memory from a burned briefing packet years ago. It was a number you never, ever called unless the world was ending. The line connected instantly. There was no ringing, just a sterile click and a voice, devoid of all emotion or identity. Liaison. Reyes swallowed, his mouth dry. This is Master Sergeant Reyes at Blackstone Mountain Training Center. I need to report a Priority 1 personnel ID. A pause stretched, thick with unspoken protocols. Go ahead, Sergeant. This line is secure. Sir, we have a volunteer on base. A retired female. She was just dismissed for a uniform violation. He took a breath. Sir, she's marked. I saw it myself. The voice on the other end remained flat, but Reyes could almost feel the unseen machinery of the deep state lurching into motion. Specify the marking. It's Spectre, sir, Reyes said, his own voice dropping to a whisper. Unit 734 Inc. The Ghost Skull. It's her. I am 100% certain. The silence that followed was heavier than anything Reyes had ever experienced. He could hear the faint, almost subliminal sound of keyboards clicking furiously in the background on the other end of the line. Databases were being queried. Red files were being opened. What is her current status, Master Sergeant? The voice asked, a new edge of urgency in its tone. She's heading for the main gate, sir. Some lieutenant, he tried to make her wear a different shirt. She refused and is leaving. Negative, the voice snapped, all pretense of calm gone. You will stop her. That is a direct order. Use any means necessary, short of force, to keep her on that base. The base commander is to be notified immediately. Tell him he has an unsanctioned Spectre operative on his soil and that this is now a level 4 situation. Acknowledge. Acknowledged, Reyes breathed. And Sergeant, the voice added, colder than the grave. This conversation never happened. But the career of the officer who disrespected that asset just did. The line went dead. Reyes stood in the silent room, the dial tone buzzing in his ear like a hornet. A level 4 situation. He had just called down the thunder. 10 minutes later, Colonel Marcus Thorne, the commander of Blackstone Mountain, strode into the administrative building. He moved with a purpose that made junior officers flatten themselves against walls. Thorne was a man forged in combat, his crisp uniform unable to hide the worn-in look of a leader who had spent more time in the field than behind a desk. He found Lieutenant Pierce preening by the front counter, clearly proud of his enforcement of base policy. Lieutenant, Thorne's voice was quiet, but it cut through the office chatter like a razor. Report. Sir, Pierce snapped to attention. Civilian volunteer, uniform non-compliance. I handled the situation according to Regulation AR 670-1. She has departed the installation. Colonel Thorne's eyes, the color of cold steel, narrowed. You did you? You took it upon yourself to dismiss a guest I personally invited, without bothering to consult the duty roster or your commanding NCO. He threw a file onto the counter. It was Sarah's. On the cover, a red stamp read, 06 discretionary authorization. Pierce's face went white. Sir, I wasn't aware. Because you didn't look, Thorne said, his voice dangerously low. You looked at a woman, and you made an assumption. You failed. Just then, Master Sergeant Reyes came jogging up, breathless. Sir, she's at the main gate. We have to stop her. Thorne held up a hand. Stand down, Master Sergeant. I'll handle this. He fixed Pierce with a final, withering glare. You will remain here. And you will contemplate how your brilliant career in uniform enforcement just ended. The colonel walked out into the unforgiving sun, his long strides eating up the ground toward the main gate. He saw her there, her duffel on the ground, speaking quietly with the gate guards. Seraphina. Thorne's voice boomed across the asphalt. Sarah turned. When she saw him, her guarded expression didn't change. Thorne stopped 10 feet from her. He didn't yell. He didn't lecture. He looked at her, at the quiet strength in her posture, and then at the tattoo, now hidden again beneath her shirt. His own face was a storm of memory and pain. "Operation Black Sun," Thorne said, his voice now thick with emotion. "Kandahar Province. My son was the platoon's radio operator. A kid. Just 19. He took a shaky breath. His squad was pinned down, overrun. Comms were dead. They were written off." Sarah's jaw tightened. A flicker of a terrible memory crossed her eyes. "But they weren't," Thorne continued, his voice cracking. "Because a ghost came out of the night. A Spectre team that wasn't there engaged a force 10 times their size. They held the line. They called in an evac on a captured radio. They pulled my boy out of the fire. He met her eyes. He told me the team leader was a woman. That she carried him to the bird herself." Sarah remained silent. Her gaze was distant, seeing a dusty, blood-soaked field a world away. Then, Colonel Marcus Thorne, in full view of the gate guards, of the passing recruits, and of a pale-faced Lieutenant Pierce watching from the admin building window, did the unthinkable. He snapped to attention, brought his hand to his brow in a perfect, trembling salute, and held it. The base commander was saluting the woman he'd just been told to kick out. "From a grateful father, Sergeant Gallo," he said, his voice choked with 16 years of unshed tears. "Permission to come aboard my base." The image of the base commander saluting the mysterious woman in the tight PT shirt spread through Blackstone like a wildfire. Whispers turned to rumors, and rumors solidified into a new, potent legend. Lieutenant Pierce was reassigned to inventory management in a windowless basement. Sarah stayed. The next morning, she stood on the track as the sun rose over the mountains. She wore the same gray shirt and black shorts. When the recruits began their 5-mile run in the thin, high-altitude air, she fell in at the front. She didn't shout encouragement. She didn't bark orders. She simply ran. Her pace was deceptively easy, her breathing even and controlled, her stride a picture of fluid efficiency. For the first mile, the young, fit soldiers kept up, their chests puffed out. By the second mile, their breathing grew ragged. By the third, their form began to break down as their lungs burned. Sarah never faltered. Her gray shirt was now dark with sweat, clinging to every powerful curve of her torso, but she ran as if the mountain air was a bomb. She wasn't just a pacer, she was a living, breathing standard they couldn't hope to meet, yet were inspired to chase. Later that day, she sat on the steps outside the barracks, cleaning a rifle with practiced, meditative movements. A young female private, one of the recruits from the run, approached her hesitantly. "Ma'am?" she asked, her voice filled with awe. They said you were a Spectre. I thought that was just a story they told us." Sarah looked up, her emerald eyes meeting the young soldiers. "The best stories are true," she said quietly. The private swallowed, her curiosity overriding her fear. "They disrespected you, because of how you look, didn't they?" Sarah paused in her work. She looked down at her own hands, strong and calloused, then back at the eager, nervous face of the next generation. "They disrespected me because they saw a uniform, but not the soldier inside it," she said, her voice clear and steady. "They saw a body, but not the strength that moves it. They saw rules, but they didn't understand service." She stood up, her presence commanding. "Your job," she told the young private, her gaze intense, "is to become so competent, so disciplined, and so strong, that they can never ignore the soldier. Make your actions so loud that your appearance becomes irrelevant. That is quiet strength." She finished her work and walked toward her jeep, leaving the young woman standing there, pondering a lesson no manual could ever teach. As Sarah drove away, she passed the formation of recruits. This time, there were no whispers, no smirks. There was only a quiet, profound respect. They saw her now. Not the woman, not the body, but the Spectre, the soldier, the standard. Have you ever been judged by your appearance, only to prove the doubters wrong? Share your story with us. We believe true strength deserves recognition. If this story resonated with you, please hit like, subscribe for more content that honors quiet heroes, and share this with someone who understands that respect is always earned. Comment with respect. Thank you for watching.